Hi, Dr. Regan Robertson, CCO of Productive Dentist Academy here, and I have a question for you. Are you finding it hard to get your team aligned to your vision, but you know you deserve growth just like everybody else? That's why we've created the PDA Productivity Workshop. For nearly 20 years, PDA workshops have helped dentists just like you align their teams, get control of scheduling, and create productive practices that they love walking into every day. Just imagine how you will feel when you know your schedule is productive, your systems are humming, and your team is aligned to your vision. It's simple, but it's not necessarily easy. We can help. Visit productivedentist.com/workshop. That's productivedentist.com/workshop to secure your seats now. So you can set that tone right away as soon as you see those windows. You can have window treatments done, or the lighting or the signage that's starting to set an expectation for me. And by the time I walk in, I might not want to see that blue every single weaving way through my particular experience. It's just to set a tone and move on to the next.
Welcome to the Everyday Practices Podcast. I'm Regan Robertson, and my co-host, Dr. Chad Johnson, and I are on a mission to share the stories of everyday dentists who generate extraordinary results using practical, proven methods you can take right into your own dental practice. If you're ready to elevate patient care and produce results that are anything but ordinary, buckle up and listen in.
Welcome to a very special episode of Everyday Practices Podcast. I am your host, Regan Robertson. My faithful and lovely co-host, Dr. Chad Johnson, is in practice today working on patients. Imagine that. So we thank you, Chad, for your service, and know how envious you are at knowing who our special guest is today. It is our own PDA faculty and practicing dentist, Dr. Maggie Augustyn. Maggie, welcome to our show.
Hello, everyone.
Maggie, tell everyone where you're calling in from.
I am hunkered down here in Lombard, Illinois. It's a western suburb of Chicago, and I practice just a couple of towns over in Elmhurst, Illinois.
You know, what's funny is I got to visit Maggie in Elmhurst. I have never been to Elmhurst in my life except for past June. And one of the, I guess you would call her an influencer, a very famous person on TikTok that I look at. She was in Elmhurst like 2 weeks ago. Yeah, she was highlighting some store and I just about jumped out of my skin and I'm like, you live in Elmhurst? I've been there. It's a great community.
It is. People tend to like it. They tend to love it. There's a lot of people that are moving from the city, young people with a little bit of money or a lot of bit of money. They're establishing the roots. There's a there's a lot of kids in the area also growing up. So it's a great community to serve.
It's really fun to be a part of something that's growing and changing. And you've got a gorgeous practice in Elmhurst with floor to ceiling windows in this historic building. And so it was my honor to go over and meet your team, see what the practice is doing. And specifically our topic for today is color and interior design and marketing and how we use color. You are an artist in your own right, besides dentistry, which I always call engineering and art come together really with health. But you have a lot of fun with color yourself. So I was wondering if you could tell our listeners a little bit about your journey with your practice and how you've used color throughout the years.
Yes, I love color. I love art. I studied art when I was in college. I studied art history. Whenever I'm in a larger town, whether it's in the United States or abroad, I always go to the museums and I just really love to look at what people have created over the years. And because we're dentists and we pay so much attention to detail, you know, we have to be able to tell the difference between A1 and A2 or BL4 when it comes to shade match. And so that kind of detail-oriented color fascination, I think, spreads into other areas of our lives. And so when it came to branding the practice or choosing the color, it's interesting because I really did not ask anybody's influence or anybody's opinion until I settled down on whatever it is that I wanted. And I tend to make decisions quickly and I tend to make decisions quite solidly. So we've been in practice for almost 18 years. And when we first took over the practice, these were different times. It was 2006. And the two colors that I chose, now see, the logo that I made, I actually drew while I was a third-year dental student. And I just kept that logo, and it's been with us since. It's changed a little bit over the years. And so the colors that I chose when we first opened our practice, and this is just what was popular back then. We're talking about almost 2 decades ago.
Did you choose the name also?
Yes.
So the logo
yes.
and the name came
so
together.
The logo and the name came together.
And the
yeah,
name is
Happy Tooth.
Thank you.
Which sometimes gets confused for a pediatric office, but nonetheless, and there's other Happy Tooths across the country as well, but we're Happy Tooth in Elmhurst. And so we chose this deep red burgundy, along with a gray. And the reason why I chose burgundy at the time was I'd read that some of the luxury brands or people associate value or quality at that point, I read with burgundy. And so I chose that, and it looked really good.
What year was this?
2006, 2007, I'd say.
2006. I'll do a little research. You keep talking.
Okay.
I'm wondering because it's quite possible that you were seeing too on the runways, or since you're an art history major too, it could even, there's all sorts of reasons why burgundy could have been popping up as a luxury color for you in your mind. It makes sense to me.
I can't wait to see what you find out. But yeah, even if you watch shows from that time, people were entirely different set of colors, and
yes.
it felt like burgundy lipsticks were far more popular than they are today, even if you think about that. And so at a certain time, it was time. It was time for us to change our brand, and because it started to look dated. And then I started to think of red and blood, and I didn't want patients to enter the office looking at the red, possibly associating it with the blood. And so we decided to change. And I'm going to give a shout out because there's an orthodontist that's a friend of mine that actually influenced partly the color that I chose. His office is called Oakbrook Orthodontics, and Dr. Neil Leroy, and he has always had the best website with the best color, with the best branding. And I would just sit there and I would go to his website and I would fantasize that one day my office or my website would look like that. And he had, I want to say like a mintish green and gray as his colors. And that was kind of his branding. And so I stole that a little bit when I started to think about color. Now, my favorite color was blue, but one of the things that you told me when we were talking about choosing a new color is that this is not about me. It is a little bit about me.
It is a little bit about you.
A little bit about me, but it's not, but it's mostly about the patients. So then I found out, if you can confirm, that the most common color used in medically related facilities or logos is blue.
Blue is, I will confirm that. I will see if I can find a study. What I will tell you is blue is predominantly used across all cultures for logo design. And the blues, the greens, the neutral beiges, neutral grays, those are predominantly seen. And that would be my editorial assessment based off seeing thousands of practices. So I would love to see a study, though. I'm a stickler for studies, but editorially, that is by and large what we see. And 12 years of designing, dental logos and working with the marketing agency, we do see a lot of those colors.
So that's where I was headed with it, but I didn't want just blue. It seemed just not unique enough and just a little boring and a little cold. And so we maybe talked a little bit about adding the green, and to me, green meant birth, or like we talked about, growth. And so by adding a little bit of the green to the blue, we ended up with a color that is maybe close to turquoise, I would say.
Yeah.
And then you inspired me to go and get a fan of colors, which I studied and sat with, and I wanted to pick a gray that would complement that. So I did quite a bit of that. And again, without very much input from other people, because I didn't want that to affect my decision.
Right.
And then I settled on Jamaica. I think it's called Jamaican Bay is the color that that ended up going into the logo. And then I reached out to you and we talked it through, and both you and Sarah, as our marketing advisors, decided that that would be a great color to go with. But I will tell you, so then we painted the walls.
Yes.
And on Monday, when everybody came to work, everyone was afraid to tell me how much they hated it.
Oh, no. It was such a shock to them.
I think so, yes. And because nothing was on the walls, and our office has very high ceilings,
Yes,
20
it does.
feet. And so, and it was, I think, overwhelming, and it was bright, in a different way. And they were too, so finally my partner said, I think you should change that color. I don't think that color is right. And I said, just give it a minute. We have to put things on the walls. It's just going to look totally different. And then when we got the marketing pictures of the team, including my partner did not like the blue. In fact, I don't think he still does not like the blue. But after the marketing pictures came back, everybody came around. They said, wow, this is a really cool looking color. And the website is probably, by the time this goes live, is going to be up. But today we have a party at my house and we're unveiling the new website for Happy Tooth that Productive Dentist Academy and the team of marketing experts has designed for us.
So you've had this, the color up. So for all listeners, she has this, like I said, beautiful historic building in Elmhurst, and one predominant wall when you walk in. It's the wall that you will see when you first open the door, and it is this Jamaican Bay blue now with art up on the walls and everything. Have you heard any feedback from patients yet, indicating a positive or a negative or anything different?
We have not had a single patient say anything negative about it. In fact, most patients that have come in have been really pleasantly surprised at how things have changed. It even gives a different vibe, a different atmosphere. You're more likely to be upbeat because that dark burgundy kind of sucked the life out of you a little bit.
You think so?
I do. It was just dark. It was sad.
Okay, there is this study that I just found from the National Library of Medicine, and it's from Frontiers in Psychology, and it is the adaptive effects of seeing a green environment on psychophysiological parameters when walking or running. So I know that's a big mouthful to take in, and I'll be fair, I haven't read the entire study yet because I just found it, but I was very excited because they really dove deep. They put them basically on treadmills and exposed them to screens that were either all red or all green. And so the conclusion that, from what I can tell anyway so far, is the perception. You aren't like, your heart rate isn't like, you're not using up more oxygen and your heart rate isn't necessarily beating faster, but your perception of seeing green makes it inherently calmer versus the red. And I have read before that when you are exposed to red or a darker red, even, it makes you more alert, and it makes you more like, it's great if you're going to proofread, for example. I know we use a red pen when we're often proofing things. So I know that it helps you to do that, but you don't want to be exposed to it for long periods of time. And the color that you chose, like you said, it has elements of blue and those warm elements as well. So it sits on the warmer tone of things, which is quite stark compared to the red, which I considered to be a blue red. So a little bit of a colder red when you walked in. So to the team who probably cares for consistency too, and knowing what's predictable and expected, that would be a complete opposite. That would be a shift. So it would be quite a shock. One of the problems that I have seen in interior design is, I know for myself, I tend to look at what I like and then I want to emulate that. So you mentioned that with the doctor that used the mint green and the gray. I'm the same way. And I think most of us are. We see what we like and we want to emulate that. There was a trend for a long time I saw where everybody wanted to look like an Apple store where Macintosh were sold, and so what they remember of it was the white. Everything was white. Everything was clean. The boxes were white. Everything was sleek. And so they wanted their offices to be that same modern feel, all white. And if you're not working with an interior designer that understands balance, and listeners, this is my one big takeaway for you. If you don't understand the balance, it can end up creating an environment that can cause headaches. It can come off as too sterile, or like you were saying, Maggie, cold, like the blues that you would associate with the other logos that you were seeing were looking cold to you. And that's because our brains are constantly trying to create an equilibrium. We want to bring a balance when we are using color. So if you really go and look at those Apple stores, what you'll see is that, yes, they were white. They also had elements like warm wood tables, or you'll notice that they had the screens up with like green noticeable. They kept window spaces open. So as you're walking through your own practice, pay attention to what's outside the windows, because people are seeing that. The lighting times 10. The color you choose, might look fantastic until it gets to be 4:30 on a winter's night and you turn on the lights, and then it can dramatically change the color of the walls. So all of those elements should be tested for. And that balance, like you said, bringing in greenery would be very helpful as well. There's a fantastic article. I'm going to put in our show notes this article from Leatrice Eisman, who she is the leading color authority, and she was the executive director for Pantone Color Institute for a long time. I've studied under her, and there's a fantastic article about creating after images in our mind and getting that balance.
This is so incredibly interesting, because even as you're speaking, and I'm thinking about the red and the blue, first of all, the fact that you said stark, I said it upbeat, but I think stark is a better description of it. At our office, we're really positive and we're really upbeat. And it's not that we have large personalities, but we just like to laugh and have fun and get along. And it felt that like that red was not communicating the atmosphere in which we wanted to provide care to our patients. It didn't translate into who we are. And now with the blue green or Jamaican Bay, that upbeat, it feels like it's much better translated in throughout the rest of the office.
Yes.
But it was interesting because even, when we talked, you don't want to take that stark blue and put it everywhere.
No. I was going to explain, for you listening in your own practice as well. Think about what I did with Maggie's office was I started from the sidewalk. I actually started from across the street, and I just let my eye naturally fall to different locations. And I observed from a completely naked perspective, basically. And so as I walked across the street, I paid attention to what was outside of your practice, what was on the building itself, what was on the windows. Every little thing leads up to the experience. And what I expect at a moment's time is going to change with me as I go throughout that appointment. So you can set that tone right away. As soon as you see those windows, you can have window treatments done, or the lighting or the signage that's starting to set an expectation for me. And by the time I walk in, I might not want to see that blue every single weaving way through my particular experience. It's just to set a tone and move on to the next. And I've often recommended for people who have favorite colors, like I had a really great friend whose favorite color is chartreuse. And chartreuse can have a very negative connotation to some people.
I got to look up what this looks like, chartreuse.
Okay, chartreuse. It's a pretty loud color.
Oh, wow. Yes. That's like a lime green, a family of lime green, I would say. No?
Fun fact. Do you remember the car brand Saturn?
Yes.
So I had a chartreuse Saturn.
I had a wasabi colored Beetle.
Oh, I like that. that sounds a lot more fun than a chartreuse Saturn.
That is an obnoxious color. Well, see, that's my opinion, right? That's my opinion.
Yeah. And so with any color, somebody's going to have either a neutral or a positive or a negative connotation. So if there's a color that tends to have more negative connotations, or it's a more complex color, perhaps, that might come off as a little bit confusing to people. Like shades of purple can come off as mystical at times, and you might not want that. But however, you might absolutely love that color. That's when I recommend, make sure that you put that in places where you can see that. Your patients don't need to be in your office. So if you desire, I was concerned. I remember, we were still early on in our relationship, Maggie, but when I made the recommendation, like if we're going to change the colors, I didn't know how you felt about the red. And I thought maybe you need red, like that is a very important color to you. And so stripping that away could strip away your identity. So if that was the case, how do we incorporate that back in? I noticed, for example, I think it was your birthday on Facebook, your team like decorated the whole, it's gorgeous. So if you go to Happy Tooth Elmhurst on Facebook and look, you'll see the team decorated for her. And I believe, if I remember right, it was like roses, like red roses, balloons. It was all red. And if you'll notice, it created the most beautiful balance with that Jamaican bay. Yes. And I thought, what an interesting story that this is telling right here. This is really, really interesting to me because it created the balance that was there with that red before. And I thought, maybe red is one of Maggie's favorite colors, or a color that means something to her. So you can still have that in your personal office space. I just don't recommend taking chartreuse and painting it down a hallway with fluorescent lights.
That would be well, in the world that I live in the way that my mind works, that would be hard for me to walk through. And I remember learning from you when we were discussing color, this is exactly what you talked about. The fact that you may like one color or you may dislike one color. Let's say, well, my favorite color is not yellow or orange. Now, if you put me in a room that I worked in that was yellow and orange, what is that going to do to the way that I work, right? It's just going to be distracting, and it's not going to put me at ease or in flow. So those are also some considerations. So if you think a color blue would be appropriate to your practice, but just like you said, but you absolutely dislike that color and are disengaged from it, what is that going to do to the way that you work? And so you either put it in a different place. Well, you put your favorite color in a different place to help align yourself, like in your private office, right?
Yeah.
Or you use the color of your practice in limited places so that you're not as affected by. But it's interesting, Regan, and it just goes back to it, how little we know about the human mind and just how much we are affected by color.
Powerfully. In the it's called the Color Answer book by Leatrice. If we use video, I don't think we're going to use video for this podcast, but if we use video, that the Color Answer book is really good. And it has color recommendations based on certain feelings that you have. And when you think about colors that you like or dislike, and how you mentioned thinking about it from the patient's perspective, I really loved here. It says, if you're suffering or fearful of claustrophobia, to paint the ceiling a sky blue. And I thought that was fascinating because our patients are looking up. They're always looking up. They're going to have to look up as soon as they lean back in that. And now in your practice, the front part of your practice has this amazing historical ceiling. It's like silver, if I recall. It's like a tile or something. It's just gorgeous. But to reproduce that in the operatories would be enormously expensive, probably not very conducive to things. And quite frankly, might not reflect the light in the right way either. So that would be an area where you could take that Jamaican bay and almost bring it in, not paint Jamaican bay on the ceiling, but you could incorporate little sky blue pops and cause that breathing and that sensation to be more relaxed in that environment. And when you talk to yellows and oranges and absolutely not liking that color, not only will you be displeased in that space, I think you will be hungry and looking for balance. So you will be looking for the complementary color of that to try to balance it out. And that, I think the goal is to help you focus as a clinician and stay in an area where your balance is restored, and then also keep that patient as calm as you can, which is why we pick often softer shades.
Yeah, I find that to be very, very fascinating. And there's an exercise that you and I did before the podcast, which I think you should share in the podcast notes, which I'm also going to share in the article that I'm writing about this. is you're looking at a screen of yellow, of a yellow
Yes.
part of a flag for 30 seconds, and then you move your eyes to the white and you're going to see a different color. And it was like magic. And it's the same thing you say in the sun. You look at the sun for too long and you
Yes.
look over and you see the image of the sun in a different color. And that's that balancing that you're talking about.
Absolutely.
Our brain needs to have that.
Yes, we will put the image in the show notes for you to look at, because yes, it's a perfect example of desiring that balance, and you cannot get away from it. I mean, it's just nature. So color does play an important role in it. And I highly advise, if you are going through a remodel, because modern design is just, I think we will end up going back into maximalism sometime, but right now, modernism, sleek and clean is still king from what I've seen in a lot of practices. And the overuse of white is a dangerous game to play. I think making sure that you have that balance is there, and the practices that do it right. I would say I see the sleek use of white maybe in the cabinet doors or maybe on the walls, but then I will see a really warm wooden welcome reception desk, or I'll see a warm coffee table, or I'll see the use of plants. So, but if you're in a city that has a lot of gray outside, if you're near skyscrapers and whatnot, you always want to have that balance, either on monitors, lighting, nature with the plants or the artwork. So always important to get that balance in there and not over dial it. On your new website, speaking of your new website, I have to share with you why I love your gray so very, very much, because you have the Jamaican Bay, and then you also have this gray. Your office has this beautiful warm wood floors throughout that I absolutely love. And the gray, to me, actually creates that balance and that homeostasis effect because it's cooler. So you've got Jamaican Bay, which is a warm blue, and you've got your beautiful, warm, rich floors. And now you've got that gray, which is a beautiful neutral, and it balances it out. It's not overly warm.
Again, I'm just in disbelief at how much goes into this, because you could go to some of these, crowd sourcing websites where you can pay $150 to have a logo designed, right? But
Yes.
what are people going to think? What is going to enter their mind as they're looking at this logo that someone designed for you, not really knowing who you are, what you stand for, what you like, how you vibe? It's an interesting dilemma, and I strongly recommend working with an expert like PDA, like Regan, to if you could get her to yourself for a few minutes to kind of look at that and to think about it, because color communicates so much. But do you have any favorite stories about office design? Well, I'm sure you do, and how color played a role, or any of that.
I do. I'll tell you, at the last PDA workshop, I did get to see, I was asked my advice on a logo design, and the logo was okay. The logo was fine. The colors were really interesting. And I asked what the reasoning was behind the choice of the color. And the response I got was, I did not choose the colors. The designer chose the colors for me. I just went with it. And I was so amazed by that, because of the, there was no consideration of materials that are already out there, the website, maybe the physical office building space, the lack of cohesion, the lack of even asking, what colors would you like? Like, even starting at the base was really fascinating to me. And it did showcase to me that, color is not for everyone. I love how you talked about the different shades of teeth, because that, by the way, is one of the sexiest things ever, to get that all matching. That is hard. And that is complex color matching. So that's another realm entirely. But, I wouldn't go to a dentist. I wouldn't go to a $150 dentist. Let me put it to you that way. That would just give me a result and not really ask my input or ask me what type of smile I was looking to receive. It might functionally work, but maybe not make me happiest in the long term. And that's a lot of the ways I think about how I approach every expert. Is I like to go to someone who is passionate about a topic and has studied the topic, because there's a lot that goes underneath the scenes that we don't think about. And I know as a dentist, you can definitely relate to that. So my favorite office design is actually Well, I have two. One I had nothing to do with. I grew up in it. It was my childhood dentist. I started seeing him when I was 8. I miss him to this day. He was a phenomenal dentist, absolute miracle. In fact, I chipped my front tooth when I was pregnant with my daughter. I don't remember what tooth it was. And it's a composite. And I've even asked Chad, can you tell me which one it is? And he can't tell me. I don't know which tooth it was. It is so perfect. So his office was gray and then mauve and purple. And even for a man too, I find that to be a really nice, complex color. He applied it beautifully. He brought in blown glass, local art. We have an arts festival here every year. My favorite thing though, and how he brought balance to these shades, which it was a warmer purple mixed with kind of a cooler gray. So the homeostasis was there, but he was big on mission trips and travel. So in each operatory were different photographs from his mission trips with very vibrantly dressed people. And so it brought in this artistic pop of color, and it humanized the space for me as a child. So it was very humanizing, and the team, of course, was wonderful. So that design, I loved it because he taught me to be brave and not just go a traditional route, just to go a traditional route. But I felt his personality, I felt his authenticity present in the practice. So it wasn't a stock photography hanging up on the wall, and it wasn't even just before and afters of patients, which I highly recommend. I think those are phenomenal, but it brought a bit of himself into it. I also thought he was very brave with the color choice as well. So that is one of my favorite color stories. My second is ChinGYN. Look up ChinGYN. It's a gynecologist office. If you listen to my podcast, you've heard me talk about them before. Fun, amazing design. They have a theme of female empowerment, and they hire a graphic designer who designs all of the art that's on the wall. It's all these famous women. So you see it everywhere. Their colors are blue, like a bright blue, a bright fresh green, and then a smiling cartoon uterus, which is pink. So these are their colors, and they reflect them in all sorts of really, really fun ways around the practice. So it's not just on the walls, it's in their scrubs, it's in their marketing collateral. They bring in greenery. They have a selfie wall that has like greenery on it, and what is it, like a blown glass lighting. So like neon lighting. They just really know how to have a lot of fun with their use of color. So they shout it loud and they shout it proud, and they're good at achieving that balance too, even though I would not call them sleek and modern and minimalist design. I would definitely call it more vibrant and more eclectic almost even. So those are two examples of practices. You can have a sleek, clean design and still bring your authentic self, or you can have a very eclectic design with a message to share. Both actually had messages, and I felt like they were both really well represented.
Yeah, that's fantastic. I'm looking at the ChinGYN website, and I see exactly what you're talking about, and that's ChinGYN.com. Yeah, just not enough color, right? And we've also talked about why certain people are attracted to certain color and how that can play off the chakras, and maybe that's for another podcast to be talked about, because I find that also to be really interesting.
Absolutely.
Why, at certain times during our lives, we like or are attracted to different colors. And
we've got stories around that. We will hold this off for podcast number 2. Maggie, thank you so much for your time this morning. It's been fantastic.
Thank you. Thank you very much. And I look forward to talking about color more.
Before we go, really quickly, what is your website so our listeners can check it out for themselves?
Yes. It's myhappytooth.com.
myhappytooth.com. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. Thank you. See you next time.
Thank you for listening to another episode of Everyday Practices Podcast. Chad and I are here every week thanks to our community of listeners just like you, and we'd love your help. It would mean the world if you can help spread the word by sharing this episode with a fellow dentist and leave us a review on iTunes or Spotify. Do you have an extraordinary story you'd like to share, or feedback on how we can make this podcast even more awesome? Drop us an email at podcast@productivedentist.com. And don't forget to check out our other podcasts from Productive Dentist Academy at productivedentist.com/podcasts. See you next week.